Potato is the most demonized food in the life of someone with diabetes or prediabetes, and at the same time one of the hardest to eliminate because it is the staple food of virtually every culture. But what science discovered in the last 2 decades is that the problem is not the potato itself, it is how it is prepared. The same potato, prepared in different ways, can have a glycemic index of 95 or 35. It can raise blood sugar by 60 points or 15 points. Today, I will show you the 7 ways to prepare potato that science has associated with better blood sugar control, and how to include each one in the diet of someone with diabetes or who wants to prevent the disease. Before the 7 ways, the context that organizes everything. The problem with potato for someone with diabetes is not the starch itself. It is the speed at which that starch converts into glucose and enters the bloodstream. The glycemic index measures exactly that. The speed of conversion of a food into blood glucose using pure glucose at index 100 as a reference. Common white potato, cooked with skin and still hot, has a glycemic index between 60 and 75, depending on the variety. Baked potato without skin can reach 95. But, and here is the central point, the same potato, chilled for 24 hours after cooking, has a glycemic index of 35 to 40. That is comparable to the index of beans and lentils. What happens during chilling? The starch in the potato structurally reorganizes into a form called resistant starch type 3. This resistant starch is not digested by pancreatic enzymes in the small intestine. It passes intact to the large intestine, where it is fermented by the gut microbiome producing short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. Butyrate has documented effects on improving insulin sensitivity in muscle and liver cells. Understanding this mechanism is understanding why the 7 ways on this list work. Way number 1. Cook, chill, and reheat. This is the way with the greatest glycemic index difference between original and modified versions. The protocol is simple. Cook the potato with skin in boiling water until tender. Remove, let cool completely at room temperature for at least 2 hours. Then refrigerate for at least 12 to 24 hours. During that period, the resistant starch type 3 rate in the potato goes from approximately 3% to 7 to 13% of dry weight, an increase of up to 300% in the amount of starch that will not be digested in the small intestine. After chilling, you can reheat the potato, and the resistant starch formed during chilling is partially preserved even after reheating, as long as it is done at low to moderate temperature. Reheating by steaming or in hot water preserves more resistant starch than frying or baking at high temperature. A clinical trial published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition compared the glycemic response of adults who consumed freshly cooked hot potato versus previously chilled and steamed reheated potato. Result: the glucose peak after the chilled reheated potato was 35% lower than after freshly cooked hot potato, and the area under the glucose curve in the following 2 hours was 28% lower. Patricia was 66 years old, a retired teacher from Phoenix with type 2 diabetes diagnosed 4 years ago, and habitual fasting glucose between 145 and 160 milligrams per deciliter. She loved potatoes and suffered trying to resist the dish she liked most. When she adopted the cook, chill for 24 hours, and steam reheat protocol, she began monitoring blood glucose 2 hours after potato meals. Postprandial readings dropped from an average of 198 to 156 milligrams per deciliter. How to do it? Cook potato with skin on Sunday, store in the refrigerator, and use throughout the week, reheating by steaming or water bath. Way number 2. Eat with skin. The potato skin is frequently discarded, and with it goes a significant part of the fiber, potassium, vitamin B6, and phenolic compounds with documented effects on glucose metabolism. The insoluble fiber in the skin creates a physical barrier between digestive enzymes and the starch inside the potato, reducing digestion speed. A study published in the Journal of Nutrition showed that consuming potato with skin versus without skin produced a 15 to 22% lower glycemic peak, depending on the variety and cooking method. Additionally, the potato skin contains chlorogenates, esters of chlorogenic acid, that inhibit the enzyme alpha-glucosidase, the same enzyme inhibited by acarbose, a prescription anti-diabetic medication. This inhibition slows the breakdown of starch into glucose in the small intestine. How to do it? Wash the potato well with a brush, cook with the skin intact, and serve with the skin. Avoid peeling before cooking. Way number 3. Add vinegar or lemon before the meal. This is one of the simplest, most studied, and most underestimated interventions for postprandial glycemic control. The acetic acid in vinegar and citric acid in lemon have documented mechanisms for reducing the glucose peak. The main mechanism is partial inhibition of salivary and pancreatic alpha amylase, the enzymes that break starch into glucose in the intestine. When these enzymes are partially inhibited by the acidic environment created by vinegar, starch is broken down more slowly and glucose enters the bloodstream at a slower rate. A clinical trial published in Diabetes Care showed that consuming 20 milliliters of apple cider vinegar before or during a high-starch meal reduced the postprandial glucose peak by 31% and improved insulin sensitivity during the meal. Richard was 69 years old, a retired farmer from Sacramento who began seasoning potatoes with apple cider vinegar, olive oil, and herbs. Postprandial blood glucose 2 hours after potato meals dropped from an average of 187 to 149 milligrams per deciliter over 8 weeks. How to do it? Mix 1 to 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice into the potato seasoning, or consume a diluted vinegar shot in water immediately before the meal. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from right now, and if not yet subscribed, click the button and turn on the bell. Way number 4. Combine with protein and quality fat. Potato eaten alone produces a very different glycemic peak than potato eaten as part of a balanced meal with protein and fat. Protein stimulates insulin secretion synergistically and delays gastric emptying. Quality fat, especially the monounsaturated fatty acids from olive oil, has a similar effect on gastric emptying and additionally activates the PPAR-alpha receptor, improving glucose oxidation in muscle cells. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed that eating potato as part of a meal with quality protein and fat reduced the effective glycemic index of the potato by 40% compared to eating it alone. Margaret was 71 years old, a retired seamstress from Atlanta, who stopped eating potato due to a restrictive diet. When she learned to combine it with protein and olive oil, she resumed including potato in meals without significant glucose peaks, and overall diet adherence improved because she no longer felt deprived of a food she loved. Way number 5. Eat the potato last in the meal. The order in which macronutrients reach the small intestine significantly influences the glycemic response of the entire meal. A clinical trial published in Diabetes Care by researchers from Weill Cornell Medical College followed adults with type 2 diabetes in 3 conditions. Result: eating protein and vegetables first and starch last reduced the postprandial glucose peak by 37% and postprandial insulin by 16% compared to eating carbohydrates first. The main mechanism is GLP-1 stimulation by protein and fiber at the start of the meal. GLP-1 delays gastric emptying and stimulates insulin secretion in advance, preparing the body for the arrival of starch. How to implement. In every meal containing potato, eat the salad or cooked vegetables first, then the meal protein, and leave the potato for last. Way number 6. Choose and prepare purple potato or purple sweet potato. Purple and violet-fleshed and skinned potatoes contain anthocyanins in much greater concentration than conventional yellow or white potatoes. Anthocyanins have documented mechanisms on glucose metabolism through 3 distinct pathways. First pathway: inhibition of intestinal alpha-glucosidase and alpha-amylase, with potency comparable to acarbose at some concentrations. Second pathway, AMPK activation in muscle and liver cells, the same pathway activated by metformin, the first-line anti-diabetic medication, which increases cellular glucose uptake independently of insulin. Third pathway, reduction of oxidative stress and inflammation in pancreatic beta cells, the insulin-producing cells often compromised in people with long-standing type 2 diabetes. A clinical trial published in the Journal of Nutritional Science administered purple potato extract to adults with prediabetes for 8 weeks and found significant reduction in HOMA-IR, the insulin resistance index. Richard Sr. was 64 years old, a retired electrician from Cleveland, who swapped 3 weekly white potato meals for cooked purple sweet potato with skin. After 12 weeks, HbA1c fell from 7.4 to 6.9%. How to prepare: cook purple potato or purple sweet potato with skin, preferably by steaming to preserve the water-soluble anthocyanins. Cooking in water can leach up to 50% of the anthocyanins into the cooking water. Chill after cooking to further potentiate resistant starch. Way number 7. Cooking method: steam and sous vide versus frying and high-temperature baking. The cooking method is the single factor with the greatest individual impact on potato glycemic index. A comparison published in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics analyzed the glycemic index of the same potato prepared in 5 different ways. Baked potato, GI 95, fried potato, GI 73, water-boiled hot potato, GI 65, steamed potato, GI 56, steamed and chilled potato, GI 36. The difference between the worst and best method is enormous. The GI 95 of baked potato is comparable to white bread, while the GI 36 of steamed and chilled potato is comparable to an apple. The mechanism explaining this difference is starch gelatinization. The higher the temperature and the lower the water presence in the cooking environment, the more the starch gelatinizes, and gelatinized starch is more rapidly digested by intestinal enzymes. Steaming keeps the starch temperature below the complete gelatinization point and preserves the granular structure of the starch, which is digested more slowly. The sous vide method, low-temperature cooking in a sealed package, is the method with the least starch gelatinization because it maintains controlled temperature below 70 degrees. Studies show that potatoes prepared sous vide at 60 to 65 degrees have a glycemic index up to 40% lower than the same potato cooked in boiling water at 100 degrees. Summary of the 7 ways with documented mechanisms and glycemic index reductions. Way 1, 24-hour chilling. Resistant starch type 3, 35 to 40% reduction in glycemic peak. Way 2, eating with skin. Fiber plus chlorogenates inhibit alpha-glucosidase, 15 to 22% reduction. Way 3, vinegar or lemon. Alpha-amylase inhibition plus delayed gastric emptying, 20 to 31% reduction. Way 4, combination with protein and fat. Delayed gastric emptying plus anticipated insulin stimulation, 35 to 40% reduction in effective GI. Way 5, potato last-in meal. Anticipated GLP-1 plus insulin stimulation, 37% reduction. Way 6, purple potato, anthocyanins with alpha-glucosidase inhibition plus AMPK activation, 25 to 45% reduction. Way 7, steam plus chilling, reduced starch gelatinization, GI 56 by steam and 36 by steam plus chilling. Practical plan to safely include potato in the diet of someone with diabetes or prediabetes. Start with the ways that require the least habit change. Eating order, potato last, and vinegar in the seasoning are the 2 interventions that cost the least effort and have immediate measurable effect on the glucometer. Then implement chilling. Cook potatoes on Sunday to use throughout the week, Progressively substitute white varieties with purple potato or purple sweet potato when available. Definitely abandon frying, the form with the worst glycemic and inflammatory profile simultaneously. A golden rule: if you have type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes and want to include potato, never eat hot potato, alone, skinless, and fried. Any one of the 7 ways applied in isolation already improves the glycemic profile. Combining 2 or 3, for example steamed potato, chilled, with skin, with vinegar in the seasoning, eaten last in the meal, the effect is additive and you can safely include potato, even with diabetes. Important: all dietary changes for people with diabetes should be monitored with a glucometer and discussed with a doctor or nutritionist. People on anti-diabetic medications like metformin, sulfonylureas, or insulin may need medication adjustment if glycemic improvement is significant. Do not stop medications without medical guidance. A meta-analysis published in the British Journal of Nutrition in 2021, analysing 24 controlled studies on the impact of potato preparation method on glycemic response, concluded that the combination of post-cooking chilling with skin consumption and acid addition consistently produced the lowest glycemic peak and smallest area under the postprandial insulin curve among all methods studied. The same article estimated that applying these strategies allows people with prediabetes to include up to 2 to 3 weekly servings of potato without compromising glycemic control within a balanced diet with professional monitoring. My friend, the potato is not the problem. Ignorance about how to prepare it is the problem. With the 7 ways on this list, you can eat potato again with pleasure and safety. Start this week. Steam a potato with skin, let it cool in the refrigerator, reheat, and serve with a drizzle of olive oil and vinegar on top, eating it last in the meal. Then measure blood glucose 2 hours later and compare with what it used to be after eating potato the traditional way. The numbers will surprise you. God bless you and give you much health. Until next time. A home monitoring experiment worth doing. If you have access to a glucometer, the most revealing experiment you can do is this. On 2 different days, eat the same amount of potato, a 150-gram portion. On the first day, hot potato, skinless, water-cooked, and eaten alone at the beginning of the meal. On the second day, steamed potato with skin, chilled for 24 hours, seasoned with vinegar and olive oil, eaten last in the meal. Measure blood glucose before eating and 1 hour and 2 hours after in both cases. The difference in numbers, which in most people is 40 to 60 points in the 1-hour peak, is the most persuasive evidence that how you prepare it matters as much as the food itself. Additional notes on resistant starch and the gut microbiome. The resistant starch formed by chilling potato does more than just reduce the glycemic peak. When it reaches the large intestine and is fermented by the gut microbiome, it selectively feeds beneficial bacteria of the genera Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus. These bacteria produce butyrate and propionate, short-chain fatty acids that have multiple documented metabolic effects. They improve insulin sensitivity in liver and muscle cells, reduce hepatic gluconeogenesis, the liver's production of new glucose, reduce systemic inflammation that worsens insulin resistance, and strengthen the intestinal mucosal barrier that, when compromised, allows bacterial products to enter the bloodstream and worsen insulin resistance further. This means that the chilled potato protocol not only reduces the immediate glycemic peak, but, consumed regularly, contributes to microbiome changes that can improve insulin sensitivity over weeks and months. Several studies have shown that regular consumption of resistant starch from various sources over 8 to 12 weeks produces measurable improvements in fasting glucose, HOMA-IR, and HbA1c, markers of long-term insulin sensitivity. The chilled potato is one of the most accessible and acceptable sources of resistant starch in a practical everyday diet. A note on variety: waxy potatoes, those with lower starch content, typically smaller and with firmer texture after cooking, like red-skinned potatoes, form more resistant starch during chilling than high-starch floury potatoes. If the goal is maximum resistant starch formation, choose waxy varieties. cook with skin, cool overnight, and reheat gently. The final glycemic index of this preparation is consistently below 40 across studies, placing it firmly in the low glycemic index category alongside legumes and most non-starchy vegetables. The glycemic index is not the only number that matters. While glycemic index is the most commonly cited measure for comparing foods, the glycemic load, which accounts for both the GI and the serving size, is more clinically relevant. A chilled potato with skin, steamed, seasoned with vinegar, in a 150-gram serving with protein and vegetables, has a glycemic load of approximately 8 to 10. A glycemic load below 10 is considered low. This means a properly prepared potato can fit within a low glycemic load diet that is appropriate for type 2 diabetes management. The problem was never that potatoes exist. The problem was the assumption that preparation doesn't matter. Baked potato alone, 200 grams, has a glycemic load of approximately 26. The same potato prepared with all 7 techniques combined has a glycemic load of approximately 8. That is the range between a problem food and a safe food for diabetes. The choice is in the preparation. Final practical summary for people with diabetes. The minimum intervention that will produce a measurable difference. Stop eating hot-baked potato alone. Replace with steamed potato with skin, served after the protein and vegetables in the meal. This single change, replacing method 7 worst with method 7 best plus method 5, can reduce postprandial glucose peaks by 50 to 60% in most people with type 2 diabetes, according to published data. The maximum intervention for the best glycemic profile: steam potato with skin, chill overnight in the refrigerator, reheat gently in steam, season with vinegar and olive oil, eat last in a meal that contains vegetables eaten first, then lean protein, then the potato. This protocol, applied consistently, allows most people with well-controlled type 2 diabetes to include 2 to 3 potato servings per week without compromising their glycemic targets, as supported by the evidence reviewed in the 2021 British Journal of Nutrition meta-analysis. Always monitor with your glucometer and adjust based on your individual response, which will vary based on your specific diabetes management, medications, and metabolic status. Work with your healthcare team to integrate these strategies into your personalized diabetes management plan. The research consistently shows that food preparation method is one of the most powerful yet underutilized tools in diabetes dietary management. For a food as widely consumed and culturally significant as potato, understanding how to transform its glycemic impact through preparation techniques gives people with diabetes a practical, sustainable, and enjoyable strategy that increases dietary adherence and quality of life. The goal is never to permanently eliminate beloved foods, but to understand how to prepare them in ways that support metabolic health. Potato prepared correctly is not your enemy. It is a food that, with the right knowledge and techniques, you can enjoy safely and deliciously throughout the rest of your life.